listeners, and welcome to a very special episode of the Hero Index podcast, because we are reviewing the Game of Thrones finale. We just watched it. We're jumping straight into it. I'm here joined by the lovely Erin Keepers.
Hello.
I'm sure you got a lot of opinions on tonight's episode, as does everybody out there right now.
Oh, a few.
Yeah. We had murder, intrigue, secrets revealed, bit deaths, and a lot of plot developments. We're not going to beat around the block too much. We're going to get straight into it. This is going to be full spoiler details. So if you haven't watched this last episode, please turn off this podcast right now.
Yeah, why are you listening to this podcast?
Why are you doing it? So go check out the finale. Come back, because we're just going to let it all fly here. First, I want to get just a general impression. Erin, whether you liked the episode or not, was it great for you? Not so great? Just the general feeling that you have as far as this finale goes of, was it satisfactory or was it a little bit lacking?
I was very, very mixed when it came to this episode, but I mean, I think you and I talked about it a little bit. I was not impressed with last episode. I thought it was probably one of the worst that they've ever done, which goes against, like, everything you read online. It's like, I heard some people saying that they thought last episode was the best episode of Game of Thrones ever of all time, and I did not see that. I thought this episode had a few really strong moments, some really, really weak ones. But overall, I think I was pleased that they didn't worry too much about getting into some big dramatic final fight this season. It was a lot more getting back to the kind of more political roots of the show. It felt a lot more like season 1, where they just wanted to kind of get everyone on the same page politically, like figure out, okay, where does everyone stand? And then we'll go from there.
I feel, well, first off, I'm going to take exception to what you said a little bit, because I was one of the people that thought the last episode was pretty good. I wasn't as high on it as some other people were saying that it was the best episode of Game of Thrones around. I saw the flaws in it, but I thought the things it did very well outweighed some of the bad things in it. This episode, I think you're right. Yeah, it got back to that political Game of Thrones that we're very familiar with, and which honestly, these kind of interactions are what we've been lacking this season. Like, it's so strange to actually see all these things coalesce in the finale. We finally have the Hound, reunited, I guess you could say, with Brienne Tarth,
yeah.
And you get to see Bran and Bronn and Tyrion interact more. And of course, you get the big interaction between Tyrion and Cersei. Mm-hmm. It felt like this episode might have been better served if we had hit all those points at another time. Because I feel like the runtime we got, this was an extended episode. It was kind of dedicated to peppering in some of those interactions that haven't had enough of.
It felt like it dragged. And it felt like a lot of what we got this episode could have been, like, I think what you were saying was just like kind of peppered throughout the whole of this season. It felt almost anticlimactic in that it didn't really get somewhere, because I feel like everything that happened was fairly predictable, just in the sense that, like, yes, Cersei agrees to help them all, but, like, even when she's making the offer, I literally was just like, oh no, she's gonna betray him. Like, this isn't a real, like, she was just talking about, oh hey, maybe if you guys, like, lied, so that wasn't too unexpected. What happened, how it went out with Sansa and Arya, that wasn't terribly unexpected, and with the Wall, not terribly unexpected. That being said, all of those things I think played out. The final result puts us about at where we all wanted to be. I think I have some issues with some of the execution of how they got there.
Yeah, and I think it's very cute too to say that you go on any forum, any subreddit for Game of Thrones, anything like that, the theories people were tossing around are pretty much exactly what played out in the episode. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it caught anyone by surprise. No. It was just, okay, well, we know how these things are going to play out, but what are we going to get to them? There are some little tweaks here and there, but it almost feels like they're sort of skulking around online like, oh, what are people saying? Of course, the episodes are written far and ahead of time.
Oh,
so if fans are predicting the show that accurately, then that means you probably got a little bit of a problem, and maybe you should, try to be a little bit more unpredictable. I did feel like this episode was very much so I don't know. I don't want to say paint by numbers, but
I mean, it was, though, because if
yeah.
you know how storytelling works and you know in general kind of what makes for a satisfying conclusion of events, you could pretty well predict everything that was going to happen in a way that Game of Thrones has never been satisfying like this before. This is the first season that Game of Thrones is off book, as it were, and you can really tell that these writers are leaning into a lot of tropes and just like predictable storytelling, and that's really not what Game of Thrones ever was before, so it feels weird.
Yeah, that's true, because you look at things like, say, the Red Wedding. The reason the Red Wedding worked so much because it just came out of nowhere, and it was shock and awe, and that's how some of the developments happened with Game of Thrones. You were quite literally blindsided by some of the things that popped up, and as you thought about them and they kind of unraveled the machinations that came to that being, you realize, like, okay, maybe we should have saw this coming.
Right.
There was a point to it. It all made sense, but now it is, yes, becoming a little bit tropey, a little bit predictable, and it's hard to be caught by surprise with anything with the show so far. So we'll get into some of the things that got revealed this episode, some developments. We first and foremost start with the meeting at King's Landing, where Daenerys, Jon Snow, and everyone on their side meets with Cersei and tries to negotiate a truce. Surprisingly, things don't come to a head. There's no violence involved, even though they have their armies there, dragons and everything like that. The most unlikeliest scenario happens, which is that they form a somewhat easily gained alliance. But of course, lo and behold, Cersei is Cersei, and she's an evil bitch, and of course she's gonna backtrack on her word and try to kill everyone once their guard is down. So, how this all played out, were you kind of expecting this to happen the way it happened, or did you think that maybe there'd be a little bit more show of force by both sides, and whether this kind of like a pissy discussion that they had, which actually wasn't even all that pissy as far as Game of Thrones conversation goes.
Yeah, everyone was, I don't know, it definitely was an interesting conversation, and I think it led to one of the first real moments of tension that I've seen in the show for several episodes in the Tyrion-Cersei conversation, when Tyrion goes into a room alone with Cersei, who has, by his own admission, tried to murder him twice that he knows of, with her gigantic Frankenstein bodyguard. And I was genuinely not sure if Tyrion was walking out of that room or not. That was, I will admit that I was very much waiting to see how it was going to play out. When Tyrion and Cersei came back and were all suddenly like, oh, cool, let's be friends. I was like, this bitch is up to something.
Yes, gotta be. I actually saw this playing out very much so how it was. I was like, okay, they're going to have their disagreements, whatever the case is going to be. And Tyrion's going to have to be the one to run the sacrifice play and offer himself up to Cersei in order to get the truce initiated. So when I saw that happen, I'm like, oh, and I was kind of predicting that Tyrion was going to be one of the major deaths this episode too, because he's really come to a place character-wise where his development is really there and arrived and everything. So if they want to kill him off at this point in time, it would work. And actually, it's hard to see if he didn't die now. I can't really see him kicking a bucket at any point in time during the rest of the Game of Thrones. I don't know what's a good way to do it at this point.
Yeah, this definitely would have been.
Yeah, so when he stepped into that room with Cersei, I was like, oh boy, here we go. But I think it reached a point too where I think once he started pouring the wine for each other, even though Cersei, being the bitch that she is, didn't partake in any of it, I was like, okay, Tyrion's going to be safe and he's going to actually get this done. But what's going to be the cost and how's it going to play out? Of course, Cersei's got a double cross plan. Right. What I didn't expect to see actually is Jaime decided he was not going to go along with the whole thing. So we had a big confrontation between Jaime and Cersei. Once Cersei reveals her plans to Jaime that she does not intend to go along with the truce and she wants to divide Daenerys and Jon Snow's forces so that she could be in better position to defeat them, regardless if the army of the dead is coming or not, she will rule
Mm-hmm.
at all cost. And Jaime is completely off the rails. He's willing to die at that point in time to say, hey, I'm not going along with this. I gave my word. It means something, which I think is a big moment for Jaime, because my criticism, I said this the last episode too, Jaime has kind of had his teeth, his balls as a character taken away from him because he's been Cersei's little bitch this entire time. So he's pretty much everything he's done in the entire series has been at the beckon of Cersei, and he's had no sort of drive of his own. So what do you think of Jaime's decision that he was going to go against his reputation of being the Oathbreaker, being the Kingslayer, and for once be true to his word and lead a contingent of Lannister forces to the Wall to help Jon Snow and Daenerys?
I think it was really great to see how far Jaime has come as a character. I think this was really the moment that Cersei saw how much he has changed as a person since that very first episode where he's pushing little children out of windows for her. Like,
easy to forget too.
Yeah, like he's probably had one of, and I mean, I guess if you look at everyone has had a pretty traumatic character arc in their own way, but I don't know, something about how Jaime's arc has played out has been very, very just like physically traumatic, and that's definitely left him with scars. Like you saw his hand, obviously they reminded you and stuff at the end there, when Snow and Winter has finally come to King's Landing. I actually was almost expecting that Cersei was going to kill him for a second there.
I was kind of bracing for it too. I was like, oh shit. Is
this going to be how he goes? Because like she already let one brother go in that exact same fashion. And if she was going to kill one of them, it would have been Tyrion. That's right. I think she isn't quite there yet. However, I did kind of have a moment, and I've been saying for a while that, like, I think Jaime's going to be the one who finally puts, the Mad Queen down and, goes back, has a return to form. But I don't know now. I could really see them taking each other out, like going down together sort of thing. Like they came into this world together, they're going to go out of it together.
Yeah, I think it'll be very poetic in that kind of way.
Yeah, it might be.
It kind of hit me when Jaime goes to turn away from her, and she said, I told you, nobody turns away from me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, man, is she really going to have the mountain run him through right now? I was like, oh, man. But you see the resolution in Jaime's face. He's scared shitless, but he's also like, I'm willing to do this. I'll die right here, right now, if that's the way it has to be. And you see Cersei soften and back off in that moment.
Right.
But yeah, seeing Jaime where he was now, I think he was probably my most hated character. I hated him even more than Cersei at the beginning of the show. And now, I mean, you see him just, and hats off to Nicholas. I won't go through the rest of his name, so hard to pronounce. But he's been really great because you really believe his journey as Jaime. You see the look on his face when he's confronting Cersei and this wild-eyed, almost manicness, and that's a very different Jaime than the one that confronted Ned Stark in King's Landing and apprehended him. He's come to a place where he's been torn down and rebuilt, and of course his interactions in his journey with Brienne of Tarth too has reinstalled a sense of honor and integrity and dedication in him, and that's the thing that separates him from Cersei eternally. He will not back off of his word. He tries to be a man of honor now, and he can't really play this Game of Thrones and be a backstabbing, conniving, manipulating person anymore. He's true to himself. He's true to his emotions and his feelings. And up until this point, Cersei has been getting the best of him with it. So it's very rewarding to see Jaime finally stand on his own and say, enough is enough. This is what I'm doing. If you want to kill me for it, fine, whatever, but this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
The next development that we get is, we find out final confirmation that, yes, Jon Snow is not actually a Snow. He is an official Targaryen.
You want to skip over Arya and Sansa?
Oh, yeah. I was going to get to that, too. Actually, we'll go ahead. We'll go ahead and get to the Arya and Sansa bit. Actually, I want to get your opinions on this, too, because we've been speaking about how things have been awful convenient story-wise with the Game of Thrones lately. And I feel like this is probably the most convenient story point where we get Peter Baelish, Littlefinger, has been playing this manipulative game of trying to get Arya and Sansa to go head with each other. And I think his final game plan with that was for Sansa to have Arya either exiled or killed so that she couldn't interfere with any of his plans. Turns out that ends up backfiring as Sansa calls court and decides to charge not Arya with treason and attempted murder, but Littlefinger. And God, the look on his face. And this also holds a tradition of Game of Thrones of the long-awaited douchebag finally gets it in the thing that we go through. We saw with Joffrey. We saw with Ramsay Bolton.
Yeah, but I think...
And now we finally see it with Littlefinger.
I think I could have done without the bait and switch, honestly. Like, have my sister brought to the Great Hall. It just rang so false the entire time. Like, last episode... So I loved everything about the scene where Littlefinger gets his. I love it. The only thing I didn't like was everything that they set up last episode with, like, Arya and Sansa bitching at each other every chance they got. Because they were alone in all of those scenes. So the writers were clearly playing up that antagonism for the audience.
Yes.
When they should have, if this was a staged event, they should have been playing it up for Littlefinger to try to get him to reveal more of his plan. And, like, they knew his plan. They didn't need that. So that entire back and forth of Sansa being like, oh, I don't trust my sister. I need to, Baelish, what would you do? Like,
Which also felt weird, too, this whole thing that she had. Why is she going to Littlefinger asking for his opinions on things when she was just checking him 2 episodes ago and not listening to anything he had to say? So in that way, it makes more sense now on Sansa's part that maybe she was playing Littlefinger the entire time and trying to find out what angle he was going for. But I think it was lacking nuance in the way of her and Arya's interactions, because I think there's a way they could have done all that where it was more subtle, where maybe Sansa finds her creepy little satchel of faces.
Bag of faces.
Or observes her more
true.
Quietly. Yeah, exactly.
If they were going to do this whole thing, like, it would have been really neat to actually end last episode. Yes, it was kind of cool with, like, Arya, like, threatening her a little bit with the knife and then turning over the handle and giving it to her and walking out. Yes, that had a lot of good dramatic, like, tension, theoretically. However, in practice, it didn't really come across that way. And I know a lot of people were extrapolating, oh, it's obviously a sign that they're working together. But was it, though? Or was that just us as an audience being an intelligent group of people being able to assume, oh, no, they're playing him? What would have been better is if we had seen, like, Sansa find the bag of faces, then suddenly, like, Arya's in the room with her, and she just looks up, and Arya slowly closes the door. And then that's all we see of that scene. Because then we have no idea what to predict. We have no idea how that plays out.
Exactly.
Like,
they could have played up the awkwardness of it. They didn't have to have this big confrontation of them shouting at each other. Just the hint of suspicion and weirdness and strangeness. That's enough. You see Arya come back with all these badass assassin skills. Know that she was part of the Faceless Men and part of this assassin cult. And know that there's possibly a motive that she would have to come after Sansa in that sort of way. So I think the fact that they overplayed that hand of, like, they made it so obvious that these two are button heads, the only possible logical resolution as a viewer that you had was that they were working together. Or they were going to have it solved some way.
That being said, I really did love everything else about that scene. I love Sansa finally being like, I may not learn quickly, but I learn. I was just
I do learn.
Oh, that was such a satisfying moment for her. And Bran admitting, like, he's like, oh yeah, I saw you. We know. Like, you're not weaseling
by the way, I have a psychic brother, by the way.
Right? And he had actually tipped his hand to Littlefinger before, with the whole Chaos is a Ladder line that Littlefinger had said ages ago. Like Littlefinger had to know shit was up, and he still kept trying to play at this game, and the Stark wolves tore him apart. And that was so satisfying for me. I love
Yeah,
that.
it was satisfying. It's always satisfying seeing somebody who deserves it get it on Game of Thrones.
Exactly.
And I think at that point where he had that confrontation with Bran, he should have realized I might be in a little bit over my head because he saw that. How much else is he seeing going around?
Right.
I have no angle anymore. And one of my critiques of this season so far is how Littlefinger has faded to the background, and I think, of course, that was going into his death, of course. But yeah, once you have Bran come back to Winterfell and you have this physical embodiment of a MacGuffin, story-wise, and a character like Littlefinger has nothing to be gained anymore because he does not have the upper hand of being able to manipulate people because you haven't all seen all in one person.
He lost the thread of his own ruse, basically. He bought his own con, is what happened. Exactly. And this season, was very directionless for him. He should have gone back to the Vale, honestly, if he wanted to keep amassing power. He should have been moving ahead, and instead he was just stalling, and obviously the writers were just waiting for this moment. So it felt very, very forced, but I cannot state enough how much I liked that scene. Everything except for like the first 2 minutes, and then everything after that was perfect.
Yeah, so it may not have been the best road to take to get to the destination, but the destination was still a great place to be. So now we could get into the next revelation, which is Jon Snow's lineage, which also, had some immediate repercussions this episode. Cough, boat sex, cough.
You just, just immediately gone and sexed your aunt. Ugh.
Yep. So Samwell gets back to Winterfell and immediately runs into Bran. And the first topic of discussion is, of course, Jon, and we get revealed that.
Can we just talk for a split second how like Bran says I know everything. What are you doing here?
I did think about that too. When it came in, oh, I know everything. Yeah, but what are you doing here?
Right. Wait a second. One of these things can't be true. Sorry,
Bran, you can't be all seeing and then not know anything.
Right? Okay, sorry. I had to laugh about
omnipotence
that.
has limits.
I mean, I guess he can't sense motive. Maybe he didn't roll a high enough perception check or something. I don't know.
Yeah, he might have to allot some skill points to that one. So they immediately start discussing Jon, and which is so weird to me because we had the whole thing where as Gilly was reading the diaries back, back there,
and Sam didn't want to hear it.
Yeah, he didn't want to hear anything, but apparently he was digesting what she was saying at that point in time. So Bran says, "Oh yeah, by the way, he's not Jon Snow, he's Jon Sand." And then Sam says, "Oh no, it turns out, not
a bastard.
Not a bastard. He's totally the true heir of Westeros right now."
So I mean, finally somebody said it. Yeah,
and so we have the confirmation. Of course, we've been 95% there for quite a while, but now it's 100% bona fide, certified. And actually, I think this is the first time we actually get to see his father on screen. I think up to this point in time, he's kind of just been disembodied and everything. So, and of course, he's very Targaryen looking. And
I think it kind of looks like the same actor they got to play the younger brother in that trio. It could have just been the same actor.
Maybe they did look very, very similar. So we have that, and then immediately we flash forward to Jon and Daenerys and their plans for traveling back to Winterfell, and Jon saying "Oh well, maybe you should sail on the boat with me because it'll be cool to show everybody that things and stuff." And then I was looking at Jorah too. I was like, "Oh, poor Jorah. He just had this look on his face, oh fuck, really?" Jorah has been the Lord Commander of the Friend Zone for 6 seasons now. Poor guy can't.
The thing is, my real problem though is that all right, the incest is bad, and honestly, if you're one of the people who ship Dany and Jon, you kind of have to be okay with Cersei and Jaime being together too, because I mean. Yeah. If you're rooting for one incestuous couple, you kind of have to be okay with all of them. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that just Jon and Dany don't actually have a lot of on-screen chemistry. It feels very flat to me.
It seems like more of a chemistry of convenience in a way.
Sure.
I won't say it feels forced. I definitely understand how these two people would find a connection and attraction to each other. especially after the events of the previous episode.
Sure.
But yeah, it seemed like, okay, wow, we're going straight into them screwing on the boat. Like, okay, which is another thing that everybody predicted.
Right. Well, oh my God, they've been leaning into the whole like, well, Dany can't have kids. They've been saying that nonstop for 2 episodes. What do you think just happened? I'll bet she just got preggers.
Yeah.
Like that, she's pregnant. Like that's what just went down, and it's
incestuous pregnancy.
So forced.
And I think it's like you said, it's the thing now where, okay, these relationships in Westeros are so normalized to us at this point in time, especially in the Targaryen bloodline. They're sort of known for it.
Right.
And of course, Jon and Dany have no idea that they're related to each other.
Right.
But yeah, we still get to see it, and as a viewer, we know. So that was the cringe moment.
Yeah.
So what do you think this has repercussions going forward for the relationship of Jon and Daenerys when they find out? How is this going to play into both their alliance and their relationship? Because, okay, now if you're Daenerys, you're banging both your nephew and the rightful king of Westeros and the person who is the challenge to your claim to the throne. So you have a lot of things to digest in that whole sort of revelation.
Yeah. Well, luckily for Dany, Jon has never wanted the Iron Throne, even though he's the rightful ruler.
True.
I don't think that's going to change. I don't think he's ever going to be like, well, I guess I'm the king now. Like, he accepted to be king in the North exclusively so that he could have a more position to fight the White Walkers. That's pretty much the biggest reason why he's still king in the North. Otherwise, I do think he would have just like handed it immediately over to Sansa and just washed his hands of the whole thing.
Very true. That's a good point.
Yeah, I also think that once he finds out that they're related, Jon's probably going to be less okay than Dany would be with the incest thing. Just because of how she's raised. Like, if Dany had been raised in court, she probably would have been married to him anyway. Like, if their father hadn't been killed and they had been raised in King's Landing, they probably would have been betrothed.
Oh, that's true.
I think Dany might be okay with that side of things, but I really don't see Jon being okay with it.
No. And I think that's the thing that's going to be a challenge is I think Jon Snow is going to have to make that decision because right now he's walking the line of living 2 lives, of being a possible, likely king of Westeros, and of course being king of the North, which that in itself is also not something that he asked for. It's something that was thrust upon him. So it's really a matter of not so much of things for Dany, but Jon Snow really challenging his claim to anything because he's not. Once he finds that out, he doesn't want it. Also, you have no claim because you're not actually a Stark. So that's the thing.
He doesn't have Winterfell. That's not his.
No. I'm wondering if he's gonna just say fuck all of it at some point in time and retire as a hermit somewhere
north of the wall.
Just
keeps going. Well, I mean, what wall at this point? You want to get into that?
Yeah, we could get into that. So the Night King returns as his army of the dead marches upon Eastwatch, and good old Tormund is there to witness everything. And he pulls out his ace card of the dragon he recently turned. That came from Daenerys as it fell last episode.
And we finally answered the question of, will it breathe fire or ice?
Yeah. Breathes blue fire, and that wall came tumbling down like it was the fall of Berlin Wall. And God, yeah, you get to see this whole army now as an immediate threat. So it's not even something that will get built up next season. We're going to kick off Season 8 going straight into this war, most likely, because winter is here, and it is swiftly going to have great repercussions for, of course, everything to the north. Yeah, Winterfell, of course, is going to be first line in the defense against the White Walkers. And really, how quickly can Daenerys, Jon, and now Jaime coalesce their forces to mount an assault? So are they all completely fucked, or do they actually stand a chance in this scenario? How bad is it going to get before the tide can get turned here?
I think we'll start off Season 8 in the middle of them already fighting White Walkers. I predicted that season 8 is going to open scene 1, episode 1 with a fighting the White Walkers in like physically in some regard. They have a bunch of dragon glass, so they're not completely defenseless. They've got dragonstone that they can keep mining. They've got what's his face? Robert Baratheon's bastard to make them some kick-ass weapons. Yeah. So I think that they will be able to make this at least an interesting fight. Like, I don't think it's just going to be like the White Walkers overpowering until all of a sudden the tides are turned, you know, sort of thing. I think the first half of next season is going to be about, you know, stopping winter, which would mean that the second half of the season would be who's gonna be the one sitting on the throne at the end of the day. It's just gonna become a knock down, drag out brawl for the throne. In the last, I'll tell you this: Cersei
should have kept some of that wildfire handy.
Well, she might get
blew
more.
up his septum. Yeah, I think it's pretty much going to be the same scenario. We're going to get straight into the thick of it because at this point in time, there's not really much else to be discussed or covered. Other than
there doesn't need to be more build up.
No, at this point in time, we just got to go straight into it. Any major disappointments for this episode thus far, or any major takeaways?
I think it was a pretty, all things considered, satisfying resolution to this season. Considering that they split this last season into 2 parts, had a few longer episodes to try to just round out everything. It does feel like they're trying to tell the story in a way that better suits the pacing rather than like, oh, we have to stick with a 10-episode formula. So I think that bodes well for next season. Just in that they'll take the number of episodes that it takes to tell the story. And I think my only real disappointment is that we still don't really have closure on what has happened to Ghost. Ghost, who would be a fantastic asset in all of this, is just vanished because they don't have the CG budget, I guess.
I guess so. Maybe he's around
those dragons
somewhere.
Looked amazing. So.
Yeah, they do. And seeing that white dragon was a sight to behold.
That was pretty cool.
It looks pretty damn fearsome. I think my only disappointment with this episode is that we didn't get a big showdown between the Hound and the Mountain. Of course, they teased it this episode, where first thing the Hound does is get in his brother's face and realizes what
I'm coming for you
creature he's become. That'll be interesting to play out.
That will be cool.
I did really enjoy actually seeing some of these characters interact, whether it's Podrick and Tyrion or Brienne and the Hound. Just seeing all these characters again made me realize what I was missing this entire season was some of these interactions that were really so great in season 6. So if we get more of that going forward, I hope that's the case. But with the shortened season that we go into next year, I'm not expecting too much of it, but it was nice to see this episode at least. And I think that's pretty much going to do it for us. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check us out, of course, on heroindex.net. Let us know your thoughts, of course, on Game of Thrones. If you enjoyed this whole thing, you can always hit us with questions too at questions@heroindex.net. And be sure to check us out on Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, anything you can stream media. Erin, thank you for joining me and reviewing the episode with me.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right, and we'll be back at this again next week, guys. Take care.